Welcome Thursday, July 18th to our live episode tonight of Wagons West. It has been a couple of weeks. I've been away from you, my friends, and sorry about that, but thanks for hanging in there. But we're back to business as usual, and it is a busy summer, so things may be touch and go, but we are here tonight. Before we get started tonight, before I bring my special guest on tonight, I did want to draw your attention to this beautiful hat. You can go get it over at tjkennedy.me/shop. And if you can see that here, you can pick up my photo book there for the Coots Blockade. There's also a digital copy. We have our hat, and you can have it in black or blue. And then we also have our t-shirt, which has the Alberta shield on front and the Wagons West logo on the back, just at the neck there. And you can get that in blue, green, black, and gray. If you want to support the show, you can do that by picking up some gear and repping us out and about, and with this beautiful Alberta shield, of course. And so I appreciate that. You can also support me and the show and myself in general by checking out our Substack at tjkennedyphoto.substack.com. Writing articles every week that come out there. Even if I do miss an episode of Wagons West, those articles will come out weekly. And also, you can support the stream directly at buymeacoffee.com/tjkennedyphoto. Aside from that, you can always go to Rumble, watch us on Rumble. We are live on Rumble, on X, on YouTube, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. But on Rumble, you can leave a Rumble rant, and I will be reading those at the end of tonight's show. Let me just go over to Rumble right now to make sure that we are good to go for the rants. Looks to be good to go for the rants. Okay, so if you want to leave a Rumble rant, we will be good to go there. Anyways, I digress. Tonight, we have on a very special guest, of course, Mr. Tariq Elnaga from Alberta, though not originally. And we're going to talk tonight about some topics. Talk about some immigration topics, some politics. We're going to talk about some rodeo and a whole lot of other stuff. Please welcome Mr. Tariq Elnaga. Tariq, sir, welcome.
TJ, how's it going, my man?
Can't complain, man. Well, that's not true. It's hot as balls up here. We were talking about a bit off camera about that. It's very sweaty. I do have my coffee, though, even though it is hot.
It's all good.
Keep the brain cell just firing.
Good sharp, yeah. Feels like that. And welcome back, man. You had, it sounds like, I know you're going to be the one that asks me questions, but it looks like you had a kick-ass expedition, man. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it was a time. I was invited by a group up in Grand Prairie area, affiliated with what's called the Peace River Independent Media Arts Association. I went to a meet and greet in the winter, met a bunch of those guys up there, did a 48-hour film challenge with them where you have to write, shoot, edit, and submit a film within certain criteria within 48 hours. So got to work with them and got along with them. And so they already had gone to what was called the Monkman Pass, which is a pass that runs through the Rockies between basically Tumbler Ridge and Prince George in BC. And they've gone out for a couple scouting missions before, and one of their camera guys was not able to make it on this journey where they were going through the entire trail tip to tail, which is marked as a 67K trail. And they asked if I would be willing to go along. I'd never been on a hike before, so I'm like, hey, sure, sounds good. And it was an absolute slog. It was, physically speaking, the hardest thing I've ever done. And but an amazing experience, amazing group of people. And if you guys ever want to check that out, you can check it out, any of the information about it at monkmanpassdocumentary.com. The Monkman spelled Monkman. And then if you're on Facebook, you can check out their page, Monkman Pass Productions, for updates and stuff like that. But yeah, it was really cool. We had we had trail for 3 days, 2 days of like pure trail, and then our third day was an ascent to the peak of a mountain, and then descent into our camp. So we hit probably about 6,000 feet down to 5,250 feet for our camping at what was called Hugh Lake, which is kind of in a little mountain bowl there. And then from day 4 to day 9, it was a 9-day excursion. There was virtually no trail. Every now and again, we'd be blessed with a game trail, but it was pure bushwhacking through man-sized plants and plants with big spiny things and terrible footing and cliff sides. And it was like literally walking through the jungle, man. We felt like we were in the middle of Jurassic Park. And but luckily, we had one minor injury. One of our girls had to get airlifted out by search and rescue due to a burn from her jet boil pot. But outside of that, there was no injuries. We all were, you know, despite all the challenges, we're all in good spirits, and it was a real good team trauma bonding experience for sure.
Man, you're such a badass. I love that. Like I saw the posting for that, and I'm like, that is totally badass. Like, well done. Well
Oh,
done.
cheers. Yeah,
I love stuff like that. You know, the
you
world needs
flattered.
more. The world needs more grit.
It does that.
And you know what? I absolutely love that. That's epic.
Speaking of grit, we'll get into your rodeo riding because I've come to Alberta. I fell in love with rodeo as well, though I don't compete in it. I do capture it on the camera, and it's just
some of the intro footage there.
Oh yeah, one of those absolute badass. I can't say badass sport because there's so many sports in rodeo. Maybe we can get to that. But before we get to that, Tariq, what about you? Where do you come from? How'd you get? Because you're not from Canada originally. How did you get over here? What drew you here? Why are you here now? You know, give me the Tariq Elnaga origin story.
Sure, heck yeah. So I was born and raised in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, and grew up there for the first 30 years of my life. Went to school there, university, started my career out there, and in Dubai it's a pretty dang cool city. It's like you see it on the stereotypes of big, tall, shiny glass buildings and the Lamborghinis and the obscene wealth and what have you. But I felt like life was missing something. And one of the advantages of growing up there is travel is wildly accessible and high quality travel. So our aviation, accessibility to travel, the airports, etc. You could decide on a Tuesday night that you want to go to Athens for the weekend or Barcelona for the weekend, and you find tickets like this and you go. So I was at home watching a Western, and I thought, man, I've never been to a rodeo in my life. It's a word completely foreign to me. So I looked up rodeos, the most tourist-friendly rodeos online, and it was either Calgary or Houston. And I thought, I've never been to Western Canada, and I'm gonna go kind of watch a rodeo in Western Canada and make a trip out of it. And I also did something I'd never done before in my life, like what a weekend getaway in Dubai is you go to a 5-star beach resort and you spend the weekend there. So I booked an RV, and I'm sure you've seen them around Banff, those like super tacky stickered up RVs. And I thought, this is pretty cool. I'm going to do this the way the Western Canadians do it. I'm going to sleep in a vehicle and camp all over the province, do the touristy stuff like Banff and Drumheller and what have you. And I bought tickets to the rodeo and the chucks, and I remember being picked up from the airport, and I booked this rig late, so it was like a massive 36-foot 8-person rig. And I've always driven cars that are very fast, very very small, and really low to the ground. They give you 20 minutes of training. They give you the keys, and they're like, good luck, man. So anyways, managed to get it to the campground, backed it in, and here we are sitting, and I'm watching the rodeo, and I'm absolutely fascinated. I thought, man, this is everything I don't know. I grew up in a house where I never had a dog, a cat, a goldfish, and so no animal experience whatsoever. And I thought, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to be on the other side of this fence. And I went home, quit my job, sold the house, sold the car, and 18 months later, I moved to Airdrie, Alberta, and here we are. And when I moved here, TJ, I did 3 things in the first 3 days. I bought a pair of cowboy boots, I bought a pickup truck, and I bought power tools. And I said, my Alberta starter pack is ready. Let's figure this out. So,
what was the first rodeo you went to? You mentioned the chucks.
So well, I went to my first ever rodeo was Calgary Stampede, and I have the poster from that year, which ironically enough is the Bull Outlaw, which on 4th Avenue and 1st Street in Calgary, there's a statue of him there. So he's only been ridden once in his life. He's now passed, but that was my first ever large rodeo, or as a matter of fact, my first ever rodeo. And then first small town rodeo to sit in the stands in and just watch was right here in Airdrie, was the first one on Canada Day long weekend. And I thought, man, I really want to be on the other side of that fence, and I finally am, today. But yeah, it was awesome. I loved it, and I just fell in love with that kind of Western grit, and we were just talking about grit and just how the camaraderie, and it was everything that I grew up in a super white collar job and really enjoyed it. It afforded a lot of life's luxuries, but I was missing that something in life, and here we are.
So you said you were in Dubai until you were 30. How old are you now?
I am 40, so I've been here 10 years now, just a little bit over. All of them in Airdrie in terms of life, but because of my rodeo habit now, I travel across the province.
You get to travel across the province. Is there a part of the province? I know you're probably like love your hometown, but if you were to say there was a part of the province that you love the most, what would it be?
Good question. I think so. A couple of different regions, and I love them equally. But up and down Highway 2 is really the rodeo circuit. I do love the southern rodeo circuit quite a bit. So Staveley, Nanton, Claresholm, those are hardcore rodeo towns. Anything from Okotoks down to Lethbridge, ton of rodeos down that way. And then that Red Deer, Ponoka, Olds area, a pile of rodeos out that way too. I'm definitely, I would say, flatlander in terms of where I like spending time in the prairies a little bit more than the mountains. There are a couple of cool mountain rodeos. So Crow's Nest Pass has a pretty cool kind of foothilly mountain rodeo. But I would say that I just love absolutely small towns and getting small town rodeos. I got to compete this year for the first time at High River on a Saturday night. There was 5,000 people in the stands, and it was just I'm like, man, I'm living my dreams. I'd say that Highway 2 corridor from Ponoka to Staveley is where my heart lives.
Nice. Yeah, I remember. I'm not so different from you in that I came from far away land in the east called Ontario, and that is probably almost as much as a culture shock to Alberta as it is. But fell in love with it out here, and during the UCP leadership race, doing photography for Todd's campaign, we stopped at a couple of rodeos, and of course we went to the Calgary Stampede. But my first ever was the Ponoka Stampede, and I was like, this is absolutely fucking incredible. Yeah. And it felt, and I might offend all you Calgary Stampeders out there, so I'm sorry if I do, but Ponoka Stampede to me seemed like a real stampede.
You are bang on. So TJ, the way I look at it is this: the Ponoka Stampede is one of the top 5 rodeos in North America, not in Canada. It's an exceptional rodeo, and it's what I'll call a real rodeo rather than an exhibition, which Calgary Stampede is. The thing about Calgary, and I get it, there's the douchebaggery, the partying, the tents, blah, blah, blah. But it is a gateway to Western sports that many people otherwise would not have. Most people don't know that if you drive 20 minutes outside of Calgary, you're going to hit 5 or 6 rodeos. But it's a gateway to that sport and to that lifestyle. So at least I appreciate that about it. What I don't appreciate is how the city's trying to water it down and make it less and less cowboy. So.
Cool. So you said you compete in rodeo. So tell me about your particular sport, how you got into it. What was that journey like? And I was scoping at your LinkedIn today before we came on. Right. And you were, as far as I know, still owner, at least founder, probably still owner of Bottom Hand Ranch. Is it? Bottom Hand Ranch, yeah.
So we'll talk about the rodeo kind of journey and then go from there. So when I moved here and I was 30, and I'm like, I want to be inside the arena. Rodeo is a highly generational sport. There is no linear path to becoming a rodeo athlete where, you join a clinic or a school or some sort of a program. It's a very who you know thing. So I started volunteering at rodeos, doing parking 50-50 sales, bartending, whatever it took. And, one thing led to another. Someone's like, call this number for riding lessons, call this number to go buy a horse, etc. And at my age, I knew that getting into rough stock events like bareback or saddle bronc or so on I was going to get into an age where most guys were aging out already at that age. So by the time you're 30, you're really aging out of most rough stock events. So I knew that I was only going to get into timed events, and the 3 being, either bulldogging, calf roping, or team roping. So I've tried both calf roping and team roping. My love came into team roping. I just love how technical it is. It's really hard. A lot has to go right, and a lot can go wrong. And then I never choose the easy path in life. So I chose to compete on the heel side and did that for 3 years in the amateurs, did 1 year of the pro-am, and now I'm a full carded professional in the professional circuit. So really living my dreams now of being a rodeo professional, competing at rodeos with guys that are total world champions and infinitely better than I am. But, I've always felt welcome and very humbled and very blessed to compete with guys. Like I look at the day sheets as they print them out and I'm like, I can't believe my name's on this day sheet with the names that are on it. Like, it's just so humbling and it's been amazing. So I compete in team roping. I have a couple of horses of my own and I'm a carded professional healer.
Nice. Bottom Hand Ranch.
Oh yeah. So Bottom Hand Ranch. So 4 or 5 years ago, COVID. Am I allowed to swear, by the way, on the show?
Or... Dude, go for it. Go for it. We're on YouTube, but whatever.
Fair. Okay. So fucking COVID times and what have you. And I was sitting a little bit bored with a friend of mine, and I said, there is no Uber for ranch hands or cowboys, where the model exists where it's a matching service. If you look at Uber, they own no cars. The drivers don't work for them, but they're the matching service. And there was all these videos. I don't know if you know who Dale Brisby is. He's kind of a social media influencer in the rodeo world. And he always talks about top hands. So top hands, like, top cowboy, top ranch hand and so on. And I'm like, great, but you can only really have one top hand. But a ranch to operate needs a lot of bottom hands. And what I've learned being in this community and is ranchers are exceptional at ranching. They're very good with cattle and such, but they're not very good recruiters or finders of talent. So we decided to start this business almost named as a joke, where it's Bottom Hand Ranch Services, and it's hiring bottom hands for ranches. And launched, got the logo package done, got a website done, got the business model done. Like most things, and this is probably part of Canadian culture that is quite different than what I grew up. Where I grew up, it's like take risks, bring in the new ideas, etc. Whereas here, if it hasn't been done before, don't do it. If it's not broke, don't do it. Don't be risky, etc. I'm like, fuck that, let's go. We launched this business on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. The phone rang at 9:30. 30 minutes later, and said, hey, we've got a preg checking day. We need a crew of 6 people. Let's go. And that was our first client. Now we have about 800 ranch hands on the books. We have ranch clients in 4 different provinces. So from BC to Manitoba. And our phone just doesn't stop ringing. Like, our team has grown quite a bit. And I'm actually looking at now taking this business into the United States. It is essentially Cowboy Uber, and it matches ranches and ranch hands. And we do it for whether that's part-time, seasonal, day workers, or full-time. And we do crews or individuals. And a lot of people are like, well, you're just bringing in Mexican workers or Brazilians or so on. 98% of our workforce is Canadian locals.
Fuck yeah, good man.
Yeah, and 98% of our workforce is Canadian workforce and locals, and it's been amazing. I love creating employment. I love helping ranches. The model I know now works, and it works really well. What was amazing was, when a ranch calls in and says, hey, we need ranch hands for X. Now they're not calling a recruiting firm or, some white collar business. The questions we ask is, are you running commercial or purebred cattle? Are you running open pasture or feedlots? What kind of equipment are you running? And we're talking their language, and they really appreciated that. So it's, I love being in the ag world now as a business, and it's a way for me to give back, but it's also a way for me to contribute to the Western Canadian ag economy in what is till today a unique business. We have no competition. We're the only business that does it. So thanks for asking about that.
Awesome. Actually, I mentioned I was snooping your LinkedIn profile earlier, and I noticed prior there was a lot of HR experience in running HR firms. So sounds to me like you took your previous HR experience and applied it to the new rodeo
in many
industry.
Ways, yeah. So TJ, I love diversity of life. I have an MBA. I also have an engineering degree, which came in handy working in oil and gas. I have a passion for HR and building careers. I don't know, this is not on my LinkedIn, but last year, midlife crisis, I hit 40. I'm like, I want to do something new. So I went to flight school and I'm now done with my private licenses, and I'm in my commercial side of, so I'm working on getting my commercial pilot's license as well. So
fuck it, man.
Yeah, I love it, man. I mean, I'm literally living my dreams. I'm flying airplanes. I'm riding horses. I'm running businesses. It's been piles of fun. So
cool. Another question I had for you before we move on to the juicy stuff. You mentioned being in the stands. You mentioned the guys make you feel welcome. You have this business where you get to kind of really integrate into the rodeo and agriculture. My question is, what's it like kind of behind the scenes? What's the culture? What's cowboy culture for those of us who don't know? Because a lot of us, like myself, will may know a few farmers. We may know a few people, but we're not like really. Again, I'm not from Alberta, right? So maybe we have some Eastern. Maybe people that live in Alberta think this is a silly question, but what's that culture like?
I'll give you a story from this year, and then I'll answer your question in general too. So this year's my first full professional year. My first professional rodeo was Tabor, and my team roping partner is 63 years old. He's been rodeoing longer than I've been alive. He's been a mentor and just been amazing, Murray McGonigal. But when we put our draws in for Tabor, I looked at the day sheet, and we were third team out. The fourth team out was Levi Simpson and Chase Simpson. Levi's the world champion. And then the team after that is Dustin Bird and Jeremy Bueller. Jeremy Bueller is a world champion. And Dustin Bird has 5 NFRs. So like the Super Bowl of rodeo, 5 NFR qualifications. And I saw the day sheet, and I kid you not, I went and had a little nervous puke. I was like, I can't believe this. Like, first way to make an entrance. I'm up against a pair of world champions in my first ever professional rodeo. At that moment, I had questions of like, am I ready? Am I not? Etc. And I called Murray, and he said, listen, man, they put their pants on in the morning just the way you do. So just get up and show up. And I did. But anyways, to answer your question, I show up to the rodeo, and I'd met them before just as a fan almost. So they come in, they recognize me, they shake my hand, and Levi, who's a world champion, asked me, he's like, so how's your season going? And I said, man, this is my first professional rodeo this year ever. And he looks me in the eye and says, you belong here. And he says, welcome. And if there's anything you need, you let me know. And then I ran into Jeremy Bueller, who I know really well too. And he asked me, I was warming up my horse, and he said, how's your season going? And I said, it's my first professional rodeo ever. He looks at me and he says, man, I wish I could feel what you're feeling right now. You hold on to that. And as I was backing into the box, he got off his horse and made sure I was settled in the box. And he's like, if you need anything, you tell me. And like, as I was leaving the box, he's like, go on now. So that's the culture of like, these are world champions. And they made sure that I felt like I belonged. They made sure that I was there. They asked if I needed anything. You show up at a rodeo missing equipment, or you get a flat or so on, everybody gets in. I lost a horse 3 years ago. I had people calling from all over the province, just really supporting me. And I was going through a lot of grief losing that horse. So it's a culture of camaraderie. It's a culture of respect. Your competitors are your best friends. And it's a culture that truly has an immense amount of respect for the land, for animals, for the West, for grit, for hard work. It's one of the few sports in the world, TJ, where if you don't win, you make no money. It's not like professional sports where you're on a salary or something like that. You've got to win, and you got to pay to play. So it's a very blue collar sport that way.
You mentioned that culture and kind of about that cowboy and that rodeo culture.
Right.
Coming from Ontario, it feels to me like that seems to be Albertan culture generally.
100%.
That's my experience. Say, I was just going to ask, what's your experience? And because you mentioned your business, you go to kind of the 4 provinces, right? BC, Alberta, right. Sask, and Manitoba. I'm sure you've been other places. What is it specifically about Alberta culture to you that is so special? And how does it stand out against other Canadian provinces?
Well, where I stand, we're a bit of a independent nation that way. I truly believe that Alberta is its unique own culture of small government, of independent and entrepreneurial grit, of getting things done, of just digging deep, and of resiliency. We're a culture that doesn't depend on the government for letting us know what to do and when to do it and how to do it. We want them out of the way. If you look at how Alberta was built on agriculture and oil, and it was built on ingenuity. And if you think about like how super harsh the climate was and how low tech we had 50, 60 years ago, and where we are today, it's incredible. So I truly think that Alberta is unique that way. Whereas I look at other provinces, especially as you move further and further east, and it's big dependence on government, high tax environments. They're not entrepreneurial. and they don't have that get her done gritty attitude that we have, and I love that. I know I didn't grow up here, but I fell in love with it, and I definitely feel like I'm part of it. So
how does that mindset differ between here and Dubai?
Great question. So so people ask me, because I worked in oil and gas for a bit, and people are like, "Oh, what's that like? Working in Dubai versus here?" And I'm like, "It's kind of a lot easier and a lot slower here." And they're like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because Dubai has a regulatory process called fuck your feelings. And, it's if there's a pipeline that makes sense because it's important for national security, or a rig that makes sense because economically is important, it's in the ground tomorrow morning. We don't have to go get consensus from 800 people that have nothing to do with the project, and all my feelings are hurt, or this, or, I'm not sure about this project, or so on. Tough shit. Like, it's important. Like, energy independence is important, national security is important, etc. And then the other thing is kind of, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier on, is risk taking. So Alberta's got that the highest in the country, but sadly we've kind of been infected by other parts. Is take risks, be bold, be fierce. Don't do what everyone else is doing, or don't study things to death until they go. Like, I'll give you an example of like. What's the answer here? Just give me 2 seconds. I'm just gonna disconnect my phone here because it's ringing. There we go. What I'll say is, they've got that absolute grit of like, get things done, let's go, and we don't have that here yet. And I'll give you examples. Like, again, building the Saddle Dome, or the new Saddle Dome. We've been studying that project for 12 years until it cost us way much more money than it should. I'm like, let's just freaking go. Like, we don't build for forward, we build for behind. We wait until things absolutely crumble, like the water line in Calgary, and then try to get things done, So
yeah, very reactive, not very proactive, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And I think Dubai's got that very proactive, let's do it better, let's do it bigger, let's do it the best. And I think we could learn from that in some ways, and be different. Like, and I've done that with my own businesses. Like, the number of people that told me Bottom Hands was going to fail was immense. And I'm like, I'm just going to do it. And if it fails, it fails. Who cares? Then I never have to answer the question, what if, So.
You said we have that grit and we have that mindset here in Alberta, but that we've been infected by other parts of the country. What are we being infected by specifically?
A love for big government is probably the biggest one, and a love for socialism. And sometimes it's against our will, right? It's imposed on Alberta as punishment by Ottawa. And sometimes it's, what's the word here? Sometimes it's just become kind of culturally ingrained. Again, we're now graduating legions and legions of people out of the schooling system that is inherently socialist, and encouraging socialism. So you're seeing it here, even in Alberta, is people that are addicted to socialism, addicted to big tax environments, addicted to big government. And I question, when does this end? When do you end out of other people's money? Right now, we're also seeing 200,000 new people, and we're going to talk about this, in migration. 200,000 new people in the last 12 months. That's 16,000 a month, give or take, moving here because it's cheaper. Now, do all of them know what makes Alberta Alberta? I'm not sure, and that worries me. That worries me a ton. So.
Yeah, we will talk about that. And since you brought it up, might as well note down like the present. Let me just share a screen here. Now, this isn't Alberta specific. This is Canada, but of course, I think Premier Danielle Smith had said the other day in a press conference that 22% of Canada's immigrants are coming to Alberta, something like this.
Correct.
About that number. I think it is on my X bookmarks.
Even though we're 12% of the population.
Yeah, here. Most Canadians think we welcome five. Can you see that, by the way? Is that sharing?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so Candace Malcolm reports that most Canadians think we welcome 500K new immigrants each year, and most Canadians think the number is too high. But Canada admits, now when they say admits, it means that that's what they tell you about, 2.2 million people per year, which is about 5% of our population, thereabouts. 500K permanent residents, 660K temporary workers, 900K students. And by the way, I just read, I was trying to find it, I couldn't, that there's like some obnoxiously low number of permanent of international students that are actually enrolled in accredited colleges. And then 143,000 asylum seekers. So 2.2 million every single year, 22% of that approximately coming to Alberta. On that note, and again, I don't have the article here, unfortunately, to give you source for anyone that's asking, but you can search it out and find it. That places like Tim Hortons and stuff are offered incentives to pay between 70 and 75% of foreign workers' wages, so that Albertans or Canadians aren't going to get hired for the same jobs, because the business, which profits the bottom line, and they have responsibility to their shareholders, they're going to be saving up to 75% of their money by hiring foreign workers. So, and we're bringing a whole lot of them in. And Tariq, this is what I wanted to ask you about, because you're from Dubai, which I've never been there, I'll confess, but I suspect it has a fair different culture than here, although pretty westernized, I'd imagine. But we're not bringing in people that share cultural values here, not just with Canada in general, but specifically with Alberta. And there's a lot of courting cultures that are not necessarily compatible with Albertan and Western culture. So I wanted to pick your brain on that, what the problem is, kind of identify that, maybe some proposed solutions, and we'll kind of go from there. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing. And this kind of shocked me. So I moved to Alberta, and I'm an immigrant, but I moved to Alberta to adopt Alberta, right? I didn't move to Alberta to change Alberta to my ways or Middle Eastern ways or whatever it is. I moved here to adopt cowboy culture, be in rodeo, and adopt the big industries of Alberta, whether that's oil and gas or agriculture or so on, and be a contributor to the system, right? I got a job 3 weeks after landing here, and have stayed in it. I've never been a burden to the system. Now, when I was in my citizenship ceremony, the judge, who was probably a liberal appointee, said, he was giving a speech about like being a Canadian citizen and blah, 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 and so on. And then he said, do not change for us. We will accept you as you are and accept your ways. And I thought, hold on a second there, buddy. That is not okay. I moved here to adopt Canada and to adopt Alberta. So I think that we've made assimilation a dirty word. And this is on us, behooves us, and I say the royal Canadian we, over the last 20 or 30 years, to have been a little bit more protectionist of our culture. And you will have Canadians on the left and Albertans on the left who will say, well, what culture is that? Do we even have a defined culture? I'm like, yeah, we do. And cultural norms and societal norms and all that. Now, this isn't about color or race as much as the left would like to make it about that. It is about societal norms, it's about culture, and it's about the way of life that we do things. And my expectation is if you're immigrating to Canada, you adopt the values of the country, you protect the values of the country, and truly uphold them and be very proud of them. And there are some immigrants that do that, but it's not the majority. It worries me also the alarming rate at which we're at right now in terms of numbers, like that 900,000 students. That is no longer a real student number. That is visa mills, cheap labor, and economic prop up of the education industry. That is just because then they fast track into permanent residency and what have you. That is not true immigration in my mind. True immigration in my mind is, what is the need for the country economically? Do we have the capacity to match it? And I would say today we don't. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit, TJ, but feel free to probe a little bit more. But yeah, that's it. That's all really.
Yeah, I was going to say too, like, and I'll bring up a video shortly. We'll get your opinion on that because we're going to talk about some provincial issues. But one of the places that we're drawing from significantly in Canada, I heard someone say this, saying that Canada, it was actually Bethan Nodwell, shout out to Bethan. She had mentioned that Canada seems to be taking in a lot of East Indians you have America taking in those from Latin America to the south, and then you have Europe that is taking in a lot of Middle Eastern. And so it's kind of like we have our preferred invader, I guess we'll say.
Yeah.
And why do we not draw from places like South Africa, where there's a definite need for people probably to be fucking refugees, to be honest with you, or other places that we can adopt a significant amount of people even in, that would not tear apart our social fabric and our cultural fabric because it is similar enough. Why do you think that is? Is it by design?
Give me 2 seconds, TJ. I just have to attend something super quick. 30 seconds.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. All right. Well, while we're there, we're going to talk to you again about the Substack. Where are we here? Browsers. Boom. You can go over to tjkennedyphoto.substack.com. We did talk about at the beginning of this interview about the Monkman Pass expedition. I recently wrote about my experience on that expedition, including with some photos taken along the journey. I have our daily stats, how much we traveled, how much we went up in terms of ascent, how much we came down in descent. You get to meet some of the team there, and some more information there. Again, that link to go to monkmanpassdocumentary.com to learn more about the project, but then also the link to go to the Facebook page there for Monkman Pass Productions, so you can check that out when you guys get a chance. And of course, I always appreciate you guys. If you do want to, you can subscribe for free to the Substack, but if you want to support my work, it's $5 a month. If you can sacrifice a coffee every month to help a young budding creative out, that'd be much appreciated. Welcome back, Tariq.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I just had to add something here real quick. Thanks for filling in. So to answer your question, and you're absolutely right. I would say that immigration is now skewed heavily towards certain ethnicities versus others. And also, we don't encourage any new immigrants to assimilate to Canada. It's almost like a dirty word. And I don't know why. Like, I really kind of wonder why. To answer your question as to why we don't bring in people from culturally similar areas, I question this. For example, closest area to move from to Canada is the United States. If I'm a United States citizen, especially from a red state, why in the world would I want to move to Canada when I get shittier healthcare, twice, if not 3 times the taxation, a much slower business process, super expensive housing, and a socialistic, borderline, sometimes communist system, as we've seen during COVID. So the question is, the culturally the most similar to us, are our neighbors to the south. If you're a U.S. citizen, and some do, because they marry a Canadian or what have you, or they get work up here. But if you're a U.S. citizen, would you willingly move to Canada? Me
personally, yeah. No, I wouldn't.
Right. So to answer your question, for areas that are somewhat similar to Canada, why would you? Right? Why would you move to Canada? So the thing is, I think if we opened up immigration tomorrow to the United States and said, hey, Americans come up here and work and so on, what American that pays a 17% tax rate in Texas is going to come up and gets privatized healthcare that's efficient and modern, accessible, and so on, is going to come up to Canada and say, yeah, please take half my money for shitty social services. So I don't think we make the incentive for top tier immigration well enough, and regardless of where that culture is from, but truly in terms of societal benefits and growth and so on, versus where we've got all these social programs, and it's almost in reverse now, where if you have your handout, we want you, because then you're dependent on the government and you'll vote for us.
I thought about that in terms of the States as well, and I agree with you. But when I'm pitching that question, I'm thinking more along the lines of the border of South Africa or Western Europe right now, which is facing Ireland, for example, is facing massive immigration crisis.
Right.
So why are we trying to, in the words of Casey Madhu, and we'll get to that video, sell this province to India, when we have other people that are more culturally similar to kind of the social fabric of Canada?
You're right.
Than others.
I'd like to see more Irish students here. Ironically enough, there are Canadian students that now go to medical school in Ireland because they because they can't get into med school in Canada. So there's that level of irony. But I think it's just an easy sell, to sell Canadian citizenship and the social programs in India. And then if you want to bring in a lot of labor, into your point about whether that's retail service or food service or delivery or Uber or whatever, it's an easy sell, in India. And so I that's the answer. And I think while I'm right now, I would love to see immigration stop for the next 5 to 10 years until we're just even able to catch up. But the other part, and to your point about the question, is why are we creating mono-ethnic immigration where it's almost all from one region of the world, rather than spreading it around at the very least? Like if it's not just people from Ireland or so on, why aren't we spreading it around?
Yes. Yeah. It sounds like you're saying from the government perspective, they're looking at some fiscal bottom line and they're not necessarily looking at a bigger picture.
And I also think that, and again, I'd love to know the percentages to this. So this is just an assumption, TJ, but are immigrants from countries that are less developed than Canada, are they beholden to the governments that bring them in? So if they've been brought in by the Liberal government, they feel that sense of loyalty. And then are they now voting for Liberal governments?
I had this conversation with some friends in terms of that, and like how do we solve this issue of mass immigration, whether legal or illegal? I don't think you're going to find many people that disagree if you say deport everybody that's been illegally immigrated or clear up a huge amount of numbers. But personally, it's like I struggle with where do I draw the line. But there was a suggestion made by one of my friends, which I thought was good, which is if you took away a lot of the incentives and benefits for permanent residents, international students, and such. That made this kind of a less appealing place. Just like you said, they want people with a handout. So if you took the handouts away and made people work for it, a la Western ethic, then it would be a largely self-correcting problem. Do you agree with that?
Exactly. Or earn it, right? Like when I moved here, I moved here under the Stephen Harper immigration program, and I don't know how it's changed, but it was 25 jobs that the local economy needed at the time. So then you're not a burden, and those jobs changed depending on what the economic need was. I moved to Alberta where there was a surplus of housing. Housing was affordable, and I made a conscious choice to adopt Alberta and to adopt its industries rather than attack it. Now, to your point, I think you have to earn social services that when you ever did fall on your feet, or fall off your feet rather, that you can earn those services rather than get them from the outset. People are like, well, Canada's a rich nation and we should share the wealth. I'm like, no, we are not a rich nation. We're so heavily in debt that your grandchildren are going to be paying for that debt, not your children. So we're not at that point today. We're not at that point of catching up, whether that's housing, education, healthcare, infrastructure. We're nowhere near there. Personally, right now, today, I think if Canada stopped immigration for the next 10 years, we might be able to catch up. Might be,
Yeah, might.
and to your point about legal and illegal immigration, obviously legal immigration, if you got here illegally, then or committed crimes while you're an immigrant, I think that the way the system works is you're supposed to be deported. But the thing about it is the vast majority of this immigration, which we can't handle or can't sustain, is legal. Like they came here as students, or as temporary foreign workers, or as permanent residents, or as caretakers, or recently now Danielle Smith announced the fast tracking program for permanent residency for police officers, which worries me. And I look at all of that and I say it's enough, and I think we're also destroying kind of the social fabric of the world.
Yeah, there it is there from the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, June 25th, 2024. New law enforcement pathway in Alberta Express entry stream. Yeah, exactly. So
here we are, new migrants. We're going to give them a gun and a badge on landing, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's a problem. And we saw that with, we kind of saw a snapshot of that during the convoy and during the blockade, right? Where you had questionable whether there were actual RCMP officers or where they were from or where they pulled in help from that were definitely loyal to the administration, not necessarily loyal to the populace that they were sworn to serve and protect.
Exactly.
You know, and yet, and if you have a government that can dangle a citizenship card in front of you, you know, you're going to do what they say, and that's kind of worrisome. You know, especially
I think it's an own goal on Danielle Smith's part. I think it's an own goal that she still has attachment to the RCMP rather than building the Alberta Provincial Police Force that she ran on. So yeah, I think two own goals from a conservative premier.
Here's and let me know. I'm going to share this while we're talking about Danielle Smith immigration stuff. Broke by Mocha Bazurgan. You're just going to have to let me know, Tariq, if you can hear this or not, because my audio sometimes goes wonky. Right here, I'll read this first, and we'll listen to the video.
I think I've seen this before. In case the audio doesn't work.
Alberta for sale. Former Minister of Immigration and Labor Casey Madu appears in a 2022 video with James Carpenter promoting the immigration firm Canada Immigration of Visa Services, CIVS. It's owned by Premier Danielle Smith's former husband, Sean G. McKinsley. They were divorced in 2006. I'm so pleased to know that my friend James is coming to India to sell our great province, said Madu, who also served as Minister of Justice until an investigation found him attempting to interfere with the administration of justice. He was later appointed Minister of Immigration and Labor by Jason Kenney. Madu holds a university degree from Nigeria. Recently, Premier Smith appointed James Carpenter as a senior representative of Alberta to the federal government. Interesting. Premier Smith now advocates for lifting immigration bans while former husband operates an immigration firm. Questions to consider. Can any immigration firm have access to a minister to promote their business? Do Albertans really want more immigration? International students from India face public backlash. We have all these Khalistani riots happening, or protests, we'll call them. But what about firms that profit by selling the province and the country to them? So let me know. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I look forward to the great conversation that James will be having with you guys in India. Thank you, Minister.
Oh, that was it. Yeah, so long story short, a firm owned by Danielle Smith's ex-husband. The guy in charge of that firm is now appointed as a representative to the federal government. And then you have her Minister of Immigration and Labor standing beside him talking about selling us to, again, India. Right. So fishy stuff.
Well, I'll tell you this. So I love my buddy Mocha. He's really cool. I've met him a couple of times. Big fan of his. But here's the thing. Even outside of these connections and family connections and Casey and so on, Danielle Smith has publicly, and many of her speeches, said that she would like to double the size of Alberta by 2050.
That's
to
right.
Get to 10 million people. Obviously, that's not going to happen through natural procreation. It's going to happen through migration, with no backup plan as to how we're going to cover the 10 million people when it comes to schooling, healthcare, education. So Adriana Lagrange yesterday announced that Alberta has, over the last 12 months, 229 net new doctors to Alberta. In the same day, Danielle Smith has said, we've had 200,000 new people to Alberta. So I did the numbers, and I think that works out to 900 new patients per doctor. And that's assuming we've already covered the backlog. So if that's like an even straight ratio, that is complete horseshit in my mind, in the sense that you're never going to catch up on shitty healthcare or shitty education with those numbers. I think she's failed to read the room on this, in the sense of now asking her federal counterparts in the federal Conservative Party, who are also never touched the issue of immigration, and say it's enough, or at least control it with economic need. It is not economically linked by any means in terms of the number. We're now picking arbitrary numbers and we're going ahead. The other thing as well is, if you're moving to Alberta, please know why you're moving to Alberta, and please also know why Alberta is cheaper. So I do this all the time. When I get in an Uber, quite often it's a new Albertan. and this happened to me once. I got into an Uber and I asked the gentleman, where are you from? And he's like, well, I just moved here from Hamilton, Ontario.
That's where I'm from.
Right on, 3 weeks ago. I like, well, welcome. And I'm like, so what brought you out to Alberta? And he's like, well, just like all the other Ontarians up and down the road, for the housing market. And I said, okay, fair. Do you know why it's cheaper? And like, do you know why you could afford a house here and not on Ontario? And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, this didn't happen randomly. Like, why can you buy a house? Why are you paying 5% GST versus 13% in Ontario? And he's like, I don't know. And he's like, because there's a big industry here, like the railways. And I'm like, excuse me, what? So he had no clue why Alberta was cheaper. And it happens because we're the smallest government province. We're the lowest taxes because we're the smallest government province. And we have industries in the private sector that support social programming so that the government doesn't have to support it or the taxpayer doesn't have to support it. And we are, I think, doing a piss poor job of telling people that move to Alberta what makes it great and what makes it affordable and what makes it accessible. And I think that advantage, the Alberta advantage, is very quickly disappearing.
Yeah, we may have the smallest government, but with all the extra, I wouldn't even call it extra public servants. I would just say even all the extra programs that are happening are starting to blow the budget a fair bit, and it's going to make things really bad for us, despite whatever resource revenue we may get.
So Danielle Smith's latest budget is $20 billion more than Rachel Notley's biggest budget. And she's grown the size of government. Grown it. And for a libertarian conservative premier, she's grown the size of government. So either we just go out and say our two options in Alberta are the socialists or the slightly less socialists.
Right.
Those are our two options right now. Or change the name of the UCP entirely today. And mind you, I'm a UCP voter backwards and forwards. But I'm also very critical of them when I think that they've strayed or not on target for what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think, and you probably experienced, in fact, I know you've experienced this, as I have, being that when we're critical of our own side, like I do strongly believe in kind of no enemies to the right, because we do have such a force against us. But at the same time, I think it's critically important that you hold your own side accountable.
100%.
You need to be above reproach. You need to kind of, you have a garden there, you have a weed growing in the garden. Well, you need to take care of the weed, or else it's going to destroy the other plants in there. And that's just the way it is. And it sucks to do it. And in terms of all their government, I really, really do wish, and I hope, I wish they do well. I want them to do well. I want them to succeed. But when I see tomfoolery, you got to say something. If you see something, say something,
I expected in the first 100 days, big, bold, badass moves on the pension plan, on the police force, on taxation, on the size of government. This is first 100 days shit. This isn't, I'm going to do this on the back half of my term or back quarter of my term, because if you're going to make big, bold moves like this, and we're a low risk society, then show that the world isn't going to end, the sky isn't going to fall, and move on with life. These aren't things she's going to do on the back half of her term. So I think that window is now closed on her making, big, bold moves. And the other thing is, people are like, well, Nenshi. I'm like, so my options are shitty or mediocre.
Right.
Those are, and because mediocre is better than bad, then is that enough? And sadly for the Canadian voter, that sometimes is enough. Is mediocre is better than bad. But no, it's not part of my standards. I want excellence. And I want to see excellence from this government. I don't want to see affordability. I want to see prosperity. And we're not there. We're not there. And I think we'll never catch up in terms of services or economy with the amount of immigration we're seeing. We're not going to catch up if we don't make big, bold moves in the reduction of the size of government. I would reckon if you chop the public service by 25% right now, nobody would notice. In terms of actual quality of service, nobody would notice. So I can't believe that I'm now asking my conservative premier to please let me keep a little bit more of my money. Could you potentially drop taxes? Maybe, please. You know,
Kind
so
of like you promised.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, and this is stroke of the pen thing, and people are like, well, it's government; these things take time. I'm like, no, 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 no. Under a conservative UCP government in 2020, we shut down the entire province in a matter of minutes.
That's
And
right.
decided who's essential and who's not essential, and how many people can be in your home, and so on. So if you can work that quick that way, you could work that quick the other way around.
Yeah.
So,
okay, so we're getting to some spicy topics now. So I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to bring this up here. Let's talk about this thing, which is a hot topic among the NDP and their supporters, but also the UCP and their supporters. And the reason why I think it is, and maybe we can clear the air here, because I think a reason why the UCP and the right are so scared about this is it's reminiscent of Take Back Alberta. Take Back Alberta about civic engagement, but because Take Back Alberta had its sights set on Kenny, I think people equate this to having its sights set on Danielle Smith, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. Let's talk about this, because I remember when this website kind of first came out, you were involved in it. I noticed that you are not on the website now, so I don't know if you are currently involved in it or not. But you can give us some education on it, anyways. Let's talk about the 1905 committee.
Absolutely. So to answer the question of whether I'm involved or not formally involved, only because I have personal projects in my life, whether it's business or rodeo or so on, that I couldn't commit to a series of meetings and board meetings, and I let Ms. Wellwood know at the time that I couldn't. So that being said, I'm a big fan of democratic engagement organizations, whether that was 1905 or TBA or so on. People talk about, you know, David Parker or Ms. Wellwood or so on, and I think, you know what, they have just as much power as you and I. Ultimately, David Parker has one vote. You have one vote. I have one vote. Ms. Wellwood has one vote. But I'm all for democratic engagement organizations like 1905, like TBA, etc. Ultimately, you know, the NDP shouldn't be the bar that we're not. So it's UCP or NDP. Ultimately, we want an exceptional UCP. And what organizations like 1905 or TBA do is they say, hey, here's the membership of the party, and here's where we want you to be accountable to the membership. And their tenets are pretty simple, like you see there: leadership, accountability, immigration, flat tax, etc. I think these are very valid asks, because if you looked at 40 years of PC rule in Alberta, where the complacency of like, well, you're going to vote for us anyways because you're going to vote for, and they got complacent. And then when they got complacent and the voters didn't show up, and we got the NDP for 4 years. So I'm all for this. I think the more education, the more awareness. Listen, man, I ran in the federal election in 2021. And if you support the Liberals, the NDP, the UCP, whatever, federal, provincial, that's awesome. If you're engaged, you know what? It's a democracy. For there to be a right, there has to be a left. But what shocked me, TJ, was the number of doors I knocked on that couldn't name who the MLA is, who the MP is, what the name of the riding is, what party's in power. And that was the vast majority. We are the victim of 30 years of Canadian politics is nice and polite and nothing happens. Look at the States, it's a shit show. And hey, like here in Canada, not much happens. That's kind of where we are. And it was very disappointing to see that a lot of men died, for you and I to be able to vote, and for you and I to be able to be democratically engaged and have the freedoms to be democratically engaged. And we just don't give a shit. And that disappoints me. So to answer your question about 1905, I'm not formally part of the organization. That being said, I do very much support democratic engagement organizations like 1905, like TBA, etc. Ultimately, they are the power of their membership, and they're the power of their engagements. And if they're engaging people and they're engaging the public, that is awesome. These organizations exist in the left. in the form of unions. Like unions are kind of a campaigning arm in many ways of the NDP. So why can't we have these organizations where we go out and engage democratically?
That's why I was talking about this the other day with a buddy about that these organizations do exist on the left, and the left are used to it. Why does the UCP, I'm just using UCP as a blanket term, or factions within it, why do they freak out so much at TBA? Why do they freak out so much at 1905 Committee or other organizations like that? Because for so long, at least in Alberta, on the conservative side of things, we've left everything to the party itself. The party has been that power structure. And it's actually, I shouldn't say power, they have been that power structure, but there's a difference between power and influence, right? And they're worried about other people that might be a little bit more dissident-minded or might disagree with them, we'll say, having the influence over the populace, and that scares them. But all they have to do is fucking do their job.
Exactly. And we shouldn't have groupthink in the conservative ranks where we all think like one. Like, what's the point? Then what makes us different than how does that make us different than the left, where we all think the same and think alike? And the one thing that I'm really keen on conservative politicians, especially in Alberta, especially in rural Alberta, is you can't take your votes for granted just because you wear a blue t-shirt. So you've got to earn our votes, and you ultimately work for us. And the UCP government is your employee and my employee. They work for us, not for the UCP, which means I expect them to deliver on their promises, and we have to hold them accountable on delivering on their promises.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. You mentioned briefly that you ran in 2021, so I'm going to bring this up here.
You bet.
You ran for the Maverick Party leadership.
I did.
So I'd like to pick your brain on this. So I'd love to hear what your experience was like during doing that leadership campaign. I watched an interview you did with Ezra Levant and Sheila Gunn-Reid. And I'd like to, so A and B. A, what was your experience like doing that? I guess A, B, and C, we'll call it. A, how was your experience like? B, what do you think of the Maverick Party, their platform, as it exists? And then C, why are you no longer involved on the federal level? And I guess we'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Great question. So lots of great questions, TJ. So to answer your question, so I ran both as a MP candidate in Banff Airdrie during the 21 election, and then ran for leadership. It didn't go my way, but man, I have no regrets. It was such an honor of my life to do it. I would have done it all over again, even knowing how it turned out. I still would have done it again. I think at the time, I had two options in 2021. With weak leadership in the Conservative Party, with Erin O'Toole, I had two options. I could bitch and complain and moan and get angry on Twitter, or I could freaking do something about it. And when I read about the Maverick concept, what spurred it for me was watching the debates of the previous election and seeing at the time Andrew Scheer and Singh and Trudeau debate each other. But then there was Yves-François Blanchet, the head of the Bloc Québécois. And he stood there and he's like, I don't care which one of you becomes leader or prime minister, what Quebec wants, Quebec gets. And I sat there watching TV and I was like, where's that guy for Alberta? Where's that guy that says what Alberta wants, Alberta gets, and puts Alberta first? Because consistently the Conservative Party has told its Alberta MPs, you're going to get elected anyways. So don't do anything bad. Don't do anything good. But let's focus on Toronto. And that's what Erin O'Toole did. Erin O'Toole made concession after concession after concession to Quebec, and said, I actually is on the record saying this, even if I lose a few votes in Alberta, so be it. And that didn't sit well with me. And hence why I ran for Maverick at the time. I think that the West, long-term, if they're ever going to remain part of Canada, especially Alberta, needs its own independent voice in the House that speaks exclusively for Alberta, because Conservative MPs today do not. Now, where I think the immediate future of Maverick, right now, Pierre Poilievre is going to blow out the West. Like, it'll be a 90% blowout for him. Is I would love to see a Maverick caucus within the Conservative Party Canada, not dissimilar to how you have different caucuses within the Republic Party or so on. And they say, hey, you want our support as Alberta MPs, you've got to put the interests of the West ahead. We're the base. I think that's the immediate future for it. Why I think today, at least in this upcoming election, there's a lot of irrational fear around vote splitting in the West, which really doesn't matter because you and I know by the time Manitoba counts its votes, the prime minister of the country has already been decided. You're not the prime minister of Canada, you're the prime minister of Toronto.
Right.
Toronto has more seats than Alberta and Saskatchewan put together. So 53 seats in the GTA. Alberta has 34. The entire province of Alberta and the entire province of Saskatchewan is 14. So I think, my involvement in Maverick, I'm very proud of. I still think that model long-term is what the West needs. But I think in the immediate need here is obviously everybody's getting behind Pierre Poilievre. I think he's a smart campaigner. I don't think he's going to put the West on the pedestal, to be very honest.
Of course not.
Because
he's loyal to those seats, and he's got to appeal to the same base in the East, right?
The irony, TJ, is he's not going to win any more seats in Alberta than Aaron O'Toole or Andrew Scheer did. You're just going to blow out Alberta anyways. So I think that's the immediate future. I'd love to see CPC MPs with a spine who stand up for Alberta. I don't think we're going to see that. I think they're going to keel over, shut up like they always have, and let Pierre do his thing.
I don't see any CPC representatives here in Alberta or anywhere in the country with a spine. Not one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's harsh, but it's a very fair statement.
Federally speaking, I'll be supporting Maverick.
I love it.
Whether someone out there might call that a fool's errand or a waste of vote, I don't care, because I got to vote my values.
I love that. Vote earning, man. That's the way to do it. I love that.
People ask about the PPC as well, and I do love the PPC, but they are just as beholden to Toronto, Quebec as all the rest. So if you're kind of a dyed-in-the-wool Albertan, I think I can't say, I'm not going to tell people how to vote, but I'm going to tell you how to vote. There's only one. There's only one that's actually going to take Western values as the priority, and I'm just going to say that. On Western values, on Western separation, whether that's pure Alberta or whether there's a balkanization and a Western faction of provinces come together, whenever I bring this to a lot of people, because Western separatist sentiment in Alberta is pretty high right now. I can't give you a percentage, but a lot of people. The biggest challenge that keeps coming up again is Indigenous issues or Indigenous affairs, because that is something that is federally regulated. Mm-hmm. So I've asked some Indigenous friends, like, what do you think? How do you see a way forward? And some of them are just too locked into the system as it exists that they can't really think outside of the box. And others have some pretty good ideas on how we can kind of go hand in hand and face the future and walk forward as independent Alberta. What do you think? In terms of Western separation, how do we make that possible? How do we make that plausible?
Not dissimilar to how we're selling Western independence to you and I, is autonomy for nations to self-manage, and be partners in resource development and be partners in investment. And I would say Alberta probably leads the country that way in the work that they do with Indigenous investment and private sector investment. So I would say that Indigenous communities, the vast majority of them in Alberta, are entrepreneurial, have their own businesses. And especially in Southern Alberta, like, they're big players in oil and gas and resource development and transportation. So yeah, I'll give them the public sector and give them that growth. So and give them the autonomy to self-manage. Don't be reliant on the government. And I think that's the sell. Who wouldn't want to be autonomous?
Right now, as far as I understand, the federal funding is given to the tribal bands, mm-hmm. and then they kind of take over for everybody else. And some of them are, well, like when you concentrate any power in the hands of a few, you know what happens.
I totally pick up what you're putting down, man. And I completely get it. So I like the Alberta model where you're investors rather than you just get money, and you just get funding, but you become investors in the community. That to me is the future. That's the way it works. To answer your question, go back on kind of Western separatism. Today, if a referendum on separation, tomorrow morning, let's say, if a referendum went on Alberta independence, it would fail. Being realistic, because there's still attachment to, well, we're going to be landlocked. I'm like, well, we're freaking landlocked anyways. We can't get our resources anywhere. BC just granted us permission to buy their wine, across the border, for fuck's sakes. And I look at that and I say, today we are already landlocked. We should be sovereign. I think the path to independence is not an on-off switch where we're a part of Canada, we're not a part of Canada tomorrow. But it's a path to sovereignty, which is what Danielle Smith should have done.
Right.
Like manage our own pension plan, manage our own police force, collect our own taxes, manage our own immigration, which ironically enough is all within our control. But she's made zero moves on any of those.
Yeah. All those things that you're going to need if you're going to be independent anyways in the future.
Exactly.
So why not take the steps that you need to get there, right? Before you flip that big switch.
I have a good friend who said it, like, the path to independence is incrementalism. It's not going to be a switch. And we can move on a lot of these things really, really quickly. And we've just dithered on them. And that window is closing, if not closed already.
Yeah, no, I agree. I absolutely agree. And the next few years, up until we're 2027 to a provincial election, that'll be very interesting to see what happens. There's a poll from Western Standard today that says, poll says Nenshi would be premier if election held tomorrow, as I read that headline.
Here's what I think about it, TJ, is I think we should be bold and badass and not cater to the left, because that only pulls us to the left. And
alienates your supporter base in the first place, the ones that you owe your loyalty to.
Exactly. Get shit done. Let's go. Then she shouldn't even be a consideration at this point. And build Alberta prosperity. Let's bring back disposable income and families that have wealth. That's what I want. I don't want just affordability. That's lame. That's going for like the bottom common denominator. Let's allow Albertan families to keep their money. Let's allow them to grow. Let's allow them to buy nice things and buy nice homes and bring disposable income back. And I haven't seen that at all from Danielle Smith or her government in terms of having Albertans keep their own money. It's not government handouts that we're looking for. So that's kind of where I look at it. In terms of Nenshi, I wouldn't underestimate him either. He is a political machine. He's a brand name in Calgary. I think he's disliked by many that dislike him already. I think where the biggest risk, I would say, is the 120,000 new people to Calgary who don't have any history to Nenshi or have any history to Danielle Smith. And keep in mind that the last election, the split in Calgary between an NDP government and a UCP government, depending on the riding, was about 1,400 votes. That's it. We have 120,000 new people in Calgary.
Yeah, it really sucks. I'm up in rural Alberta. It sucks that there's so much power concentrated in the shitties.
And here's the thing is, you've got to sell prosperity to the cities and small government to the cities, which ironically enough, Calgary was that. The Calgary I moved to 10 years ago was that,
Yeah, man. We're kind of on the fast track right now to be bottom shelf Alberta, and I really don't like that. So I really hope there is a turnaround. We'll see. I guess in November, there's the UCP AGM, and maybe the membership will hold the government accountable, and maybe they won't. I guess time will tell, won't it?
Let me tell you where I stand. And this is not part of 1905. This isn't part of any TBA. This is me, an individual card-carrying UCP member. I have 4 things I would like to see from Danielle Smith by November 1st. The vote's on November 2nd. If there are no concrete plans on those 4 things, I will be voting against her leadership and no confidence. And those 4 things are pretty simple. 1 is a reduction in the size of taxes, a reduction in the size of government. 3 is the Alberta sovereignty. No dilly-dallying, no reports, no studies on the police force or the pension plan. It is they're getting done or they're not getting done. And 4 is a open statement that Alberta is full and we cannot catch up with immigration. If I personally don't see those by November 1st, evening of November 2nd, I'm going to be voting against. And that's what you could do if you're a UCP member, any of us. And it's not hope, it's concrete action of saying deliver what you were elected on. It's hers to lose. Deliver what you were elected to deliver, or we'll find someone else that does it. And the who doesn't matter. It's the what. What are they going to do? Because quite frankly, those were the exact things she was elected on.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you there, man. Something that I think is indicative of the entire campaign, and especially as you said, Pierre's going to be coming in probably with a crushing landslide. I really question the ability to stand up to Ottawa when Ottawa is so friendly to our premier. But she came out of the gate with that Alberta Sovereignty Act, and then it seemed like that got her far ahead in the leadership race, and nobody else could catch up after she came out with that. And as soon as she got the leadership, and as soon as she got in, what did it become? It's not the Alberta Sovereignty Act. It's the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act. And it's like, I see where this is going.
And one of the things, if you notice, she's completely buried and is not talking about is the pension plan.
That's right.
And that is a no-brainer. We have paid into it more than we have ever taken out for decades. And that is an absolute, and not just that, the CPP is being used to invest in businesses that hate Alberta economies, right?
That's
like
right.
Chinese auto manufacturers and what have you. And here we are dilly-dallying and dithering, and well, the NDP had an effective campaign against the AP. I'm like, fuck that. Just get her fucking done. Rip off the Band-Aid and go. That's what I'd like to see. And I haven't seen it. Now, am I hopeful or faithful that she's going to have a plan by November 1? I strongly doubt it. And there will be some very nicely worded answers, some nicely worded letters.
Sure.
Nicely worded letters do shit for my bank account.
Yeah.
I want action or a bust.
We'll talk about. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say she delayed the tax cuts to sometime maybe next year. We'll grow the heritage funds. There is another article in the Western Standard about her wanting to dip into the heritage funds. I'm like, how freaking socialist are you? And I bet you could find line items in the budget to cut taxes tomorrow night. If you really tried. If you really tried.
I remember it was during the leadership race. It was August 5th. There was a rally or town hall in Grand Prairie where someone questioned her on her statements on net zero. And she said, and I heard it with my own ears, there was no recording. I can't prove it, but you got to take my word for it. She said, what I mean is we're already net zero with all of our grasslands, with all of our forests and stuff like that. We're already basically a carbon neutral province. But she talks about phasing out oil and gas over time. I remember that big announcement she came out with to the public there, kind of the province's plan. When you're talking about going net zero by 2050, it's like, no, Trudeau, we're not going to go net zero by 2035. It's going to be by 2050.
Correct.
But we're going to phase out oil and gas. But then you mentioned you love Southern Alberta. Now you see all the solar fields that are just basically destroying the ecosystem down there, and all the do nothing windmills that are.
Yep.
It's such a bad idea.
Products. Rebecca Schultz just announced $44 million of subsidies or grants or something to emissions reductions. I'm like, what the actual fuck?
What do you think a fucking forest is? That's carbon reduction right there.
Is going so. And we will never appease the left. So stop worrying about the left. Stop worrying about the media. We will never appease the left. If you want to get shit done, just the easiest way to do this is get out of the way. The best thing a government could do, in an ideal world, there'd be little to no government. But the best thing a government can do is get out of the fucking way. And right now, we're not. So yeah, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see a complete reduction of government. Yeah, we're not there. If anything, we're seeing a growth in the size of government. We're seeing her continue to talk about net zero, or seeing her continue to talk about carbon capture projects. No, and the government should be in the business of nothing. The government should not be picking winners and losers. They should be in the business of nothing. They should open the free market and let the free market decide. Absolutely,
man. I agree with you. As we wrap up here, is there anything else that we did not cover that you'd like to bring to the viewers' attention?
I think, you know what, I love that we've covered a gamut of topics, whether that was immigration, Alberta culture, what makes us unique and different, and why I love this province and why I bleed Alberta, even though I didn't grow up here. I think the most pressing thing for your Western listener, is holding our own conservative politicians accountable. And if there's one thing, like I would say, is just because they're not the left, it doesn't mean that they're awesome. They have to go out and earn our votes. And right now, I see very little of that. Not completely non-existent, but very little of it. I want the right to earn our votes. I want the right to actually be conservative again. Stop dilly-dallying. Stop making excuses about the government running really slow. Or, I mean, fuck, the conservative government of Alberta, again, ran really fast during COVID. Got shit done. The wrong shit done, but got shit done. So the thing is, get shit done quickly the other way around. Cut taxes, cut the size of government. Start openly talking about immigration, and don't worry about people calling you racist, because in the long term, you're actually building society. And this has nothing to do with race. This has to do with societal growth and catching up and being able to continue to maintain an affordable society here. That's the Alberta I know. Alberta that I moved to 10 years ago, people were walking 3 feet off the ground. They had disposable income. Every 18-year-old kid in high school had a dually because they worked in Fort Mac during the summers. And they could afford it, and they could afford to go on vacation. They could afford toys like jet skis and quads and what have you. I want that Alberta back. And that's my dream for the province.
Awesome. Tariq, where can people find you?
On Twitter, I would say is probably the best option. So I go by my real name. I don't have a handle. It's Tariq Elnaga. I love engaging. I love being politically active and engaging. And you'll see me here and there at political events, whether it's democratic engagement organizations or UCP events or what have you. Again, engage with me. I'm not always right. When you want to disagree with me, that's good. I think that's really healthy, and I think we shouldn't have groupthink on the right. But yeah, that's it. That's all, man. Thank you.
Awesome,
Thanks
brother.
for having me, man. I love this.
Well, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. It's been a good conversation.
Likewise.
Yeah, and guys, once again, the summer's a bit touch and go, but generally speaking, we are here every Thursday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. if you're watching out in the East, right here on Wagons West on basically your social media platform of choice. Do go to Rumble, do go to X. Those are the ones that I most prioritize, and appreciate having you on, Tariq. Thanks again.
You betcha, sir. Thank you very much for having me. You're awesome.
All right, go, guys. Sweating so hard. We'll go get cool now.
I believe it. Thanks, man.
Cheers, man.
Cheers.